Hi everyone, welcome to Breakfast with Royals again. I am Michelle from michellesmidheaven.com and my guest is my friend and brilliant astrologer David Fischer. Hi David, how are you doing?
Michelle, it's nice to be here again. How are you?
I'm good. Today will be our very last episode in the series that we're doing about Alexandra Feodorovna, and I hope that you've all enjoyed it so far. In this final chapter, we'll continue to look at traditional timing techniques, and just like last time, we're paying attention to the Time Lord of the year by profection in combination with the transiting planets. So here you see the annual profections wheel again. And look, David, at how much we have to cover today.
Yeah, she's highlighted a few of the years that we are going to go over.
So I'm gonna go ahead and pull up Alex's chart right away. Here we go. And this is November 1st, 1894. And you can see Alex's natal chart is in the inner wheel, and we have the transits in the outer wheel. So I highlighted the Lord of the Year, which is Mars here, because we are in an 11th house profection year in Aries. David, could you walk us through what is happening here in November?
Definitely. So we left off on a more positive note last time because we were talking about her engagement with Nicholas. We were talking about how they were happy about getting married. But we also said that we were going to cover some tragedy in the later part of her life. And this is what's going to happen here. We are seeing her ascension, basically, not really her ascension, but Nicholas's first, because Nicholas became emperor as soon as his father died. And this is when it happened, November 1st. She was not yet married to him, so she was not officially made empress. But at this point, she lost who would be her father-in-law. They were already engaged to be married in a few days, and they did, as we are going to see. But here, we have the ruler of the year being Mars in the 11th house. I'm not really sure how to tie the 11th house, except for the fact that she was gaining more authority. She was realizing also a dream, because the 11th house is about goals, expectations, things that she would like to do. She was marrying the men she loved. And there were some harsh circumstances around their marriage. You see, this is the death of her father-in-law, which confers her and her husband power. So harsh circumstances, again, we have covered this before. Mars is conjoined with Venus in her natal chart. So the themes around marriage, the themes around her wedding had also to do with death and with the funeral that they were having for the Tsar. But we are going to get to that here. I want to mention also that the sun was the lord of the month, because it was a year of Aries, the 11th house, and the month of the 3rd house of Leo by the monthly perfections within the year of Aries. So the sun, as the ruler of the month, was also answering to Mars in this transit chart. We see Venus also answering to Mars, Mercury retrograde also answering to Mars. So there's a lot of planets under the authority of the Lord of the Year. That also gives you a clue that this part of the year in particular is going to be prominent in this period in events. And Leo, of course, is associated with kings, is associated with power, and her husband was conferred power as his father passed away. We can also mention briefly that Scorpio is also associated with death, because the malefics are associated with themes that are contrary to life and sudden events. Let's remember that although the Tsar was waning, his health had been waning for the past few months, it was kind of a sudden event politically for a whole country to adjust to the loss of a leader that they didn't expect to die yet for decades, for at least decades. So this was all very rushed. I mean, not hushed. Sorry, this was all very rushed. And the Alex, as we are going to see in the next slide, and we also have Jupiter here in the still. We also have Jupiter in the in Cancer, which is a reaffirmation of a natal theme of being exalted, being put to the heights, and it's the ruler of her 10th. So there's these reaffirmations.
Yeah, sure. And I'm already on the next slide because their wedding happened in the very same 11th house profection year of Aries, ruled by Mars. They got married right after Nick's father died. The date of the wedding was November 26th here in 1894.
I want to mention with that the Tsarina, she was said to have come to their people behind a coffin. By the Russian people. And this was the rumor. There was kind of these popular sayings that were spread around about people in certain times in their lives, bad press. And because the Tsar had just died and his son was marrying her immediately, let's remember that they don't marry as they're being coronated, or they don't generally marry when they after they ascend to the throne. That's not that usual. Many of the times, people that are going to ascend to the throne, princes, they're expected to marry before they ascend to the throne, and they usually do. This is not the case for Nicholas because his father, as I said, died unexpectedly. And here we have them saying that she came behind a coffin. We see that Neptune in her 11th house, which was where Mars was also going retrograde over when he died, is going through her ascendant right at the degree where she has her natal eclipse, and her image as a queen was stained, let's say, by this death event that preceded her wedding so closely. We have her wedding taking place less than a little over 3 weeks after he passed away. So she said, even in her diaries, or in a letter, I don't remember when I heard it from the source documentary, they said that she wrote that she felt as if she was still in a funeral when she was going down the aisle to get married to Nicholas, but she was wearing a white dress instead of a black one. That's how she described it. We have Mercury and Mars being retrograde during the death period, but then direct during the wedding. And there is this feeling of redoing something that she describes in her wedding here. And this being a funeral, this being a very heavy event around her wedding. So we see again the repetition of the natal promise of Mars, bad events being associated with Venusian events of the wedding. And here, I think I don't even need to mention this, but Venus is transiting her exact opposition in the wedding date. And that's also when she is Cazimi to the sun. And that's in her 7th house. She was married to a king. We don't even need to say it.
Beautiful symbol. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And then
and there was also, let me see, this is May 14th. Let's talk about it in the next slide. That's okay. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, so May 14th here was the day of the coronation. You were talking a little about that, the coronation. Alexandra was still 23 years old here because her birthday is in June. And so the coronation actually happened during a 12th house profection year.
Yeah, so we see that the Lord of the Year, Venus, is with the sun here. Venus is also, let me see if she's out of the rays. Is she, Michelle? I can't really count.
Venus is at 8 degrees and the sun is at 24 degrees. So yes, she is out of the rays. Yeah.
She's out of the rays. She is in her own light. She is direct. She's a morning star. So she's kind of agreeing to this diurnal sect. So this Venus is kind of powerful here, even though she's in the 12th house, kind of symbolizing her coronation in a way. It was a pageant We can put it like that, which is a very Venusian word. She was displayed for everyone to see with the Tsar with these very sumptuous clothes. And these clothes, they were very symbolic because they symbolized that she was German, coming from a British royal household as a minor royal. She was not very popular for her heritage in Russia, and so they made her look here very much more Russian than she actually was by culture, and how they actually viewed her in court, even because she was ostracized, as we said in the first video. They didn't really agree to her ways of dealing with court matters and of behaving, because she was a very hands-on personality kind of person, kind of type, and she was educated in the British court to teach her children to make their own beds, to breastfeed her children, as her mother did with her. And in here, we can kind of see a foreshadowing, because all of this is in the 12th house with her Mercury also, the sun being with her Mercury. We can kind of see this foreshadowing because Mercury was also responsible for saying that she was kind of ostracized. She felt like she didn't belong in the place she resided in. And in the place that was given to her to rule. Basically, she felt ostracized. Mercury as a ruler of the first and as of the fourth, being in the 12th. She felt like even though she had all the pageant and all the circumstance, she couldn't feel that role of power truly. So this was all a pageant. I just went off in a little tangent here about how pageantry can sometimes try to hide the true lack of power in these monarchies through history. So but Venus was elevated here, although it was in her 12th house, foreshadowing all of this. And the sun, of course, is being eclipsed in Gemini, and here it's making a conjunction to her natal Mercury, which is also, of course, being activated by the profection as an important point of the year. Mercury, on the other hand, is also transiting her natal eclipse point, which tells us that this part of the year is incredibly important. Not only the sign of the year is being activated by the Lord of the year, but also the planet contained in it, which is prominent in the natal chart, is also being made prominent by transit, and the moon is activating it. We also have Neptune, which adds to the pageantry and trying to hold up an image to other people that is not necessarily sustained by reality. We have mutable qualities here as well that I'm just going to throw in there for those of you who know how to understand what I'm talking about. But these are all details we can look at this in this chart. Mm-hmm. Jupiter is in Leo as well, kind of a symbol of power. Mars is in her 10th. Do we have a next slide about the stampede, or is it in this slide?
This is in this slide, because the stampede also happened during this 12th house perfection year. Yeah, this is it.
Yeah, so the stampede was right on the day after the coronation, because there are still festivities happening. And this coronation had gotten so popular, so out of proportionally popular. And we see here Mercury in its own domicile with Neptune. We see that there was this wild spreading of rumors that the Tsar was actually going to give a lot of gold to people and a lot of food, a lot of sumptuous food and stuff. There was all kinds of rumors spread through the highly poor people of Russia at the time, because they were still made very poor by the majority. What did you say?
Yeah, people expected that there would be an abundance of food, and everyone went there. Yeah.
And they talked about the Tsar as if the Tsar was a god. That's the image that the monarchy wanted to portray. That's also why the pageantry was portrayed the way it was to the public. And so how could they run out of goods as they did? As I'm going to say, they actually ran out of the little gifts, the little handouts that they were giving for the people, the little pouches with the things. That include a little bit of food, a little bit of promotional material with like mugs, I think, with the Tsar and the Tsarina painted on them or something like that. these festivity things that monarchies do. You can check it all about it in the internet. They ran out, and the people started revolting against it, and that further tarnished their image onto the people. So something that they tried to do, you see, eclipses have this way of twisting things. Everything you try to do kind of backfires on you. And her Mercury is not being very helpful, being in the 12th house as well for her as a natal promise. So everything she tried to do, not even by herself, it was all being advised because she was a foreign princess. Her husband was very poorly trained in the art of being a czar, even though he was always meant to be the czar. His father was very negligent in his education as such, and he himself was not. He never wanted to be czar. So they didn't really know what to do, and they were following the advice of people who were having their own interests in keeping politics as it was. So they were ill-advised. They were portraying an image that was not being sustained by the true reality of their country and of their people. And their people were being constantly let down by them and having bad omens, let's say, and revolts coming up against the Tsar being well-founded by the lack of support that they were experiencing, basically, from the government. And Tsar Nicholas and Alexandra were made blissfully and aware of it most of the time, be it because they didn't want to be bothered by it, because they had their own problems to deal with, i.e. health of their children that we're going to deal with later on in this video. But in this case, this stampede, when people revolted in their marriage, was the starting point of the Tsar doesn't really care about us. Oh, she is only here to spend our money with lavish parties and gowns, and doesn't even care about their own people dying.
Yeah.
And that's because they attended a party that night, ill-advised again by their own counselors, that not attending a party that the French government was throwing in their honor because of the coronation would be rude, and they would be politically cast out, basically. So they didn't want that. She was very young. She was like, okay, of course. You guys probably know what you're talking about. I'm new here. Let's do it. But that further, tarnished their reputation with the public because they were seen as cold for not mourning for their people and going to a ball. Alexandra is said to be quite distressed by the whole situation, and they were notably paying for the costs of the funerals of those who died in this stampede, because it was hundreds of people. It was a very nasty event involving the military rule commanded by the Tsar. So, yeah, it was a nasty event, and their reputation was forever tarnished, even though they tried to make amends for it. They did exactly the opposite of what they needed to do because they were ill-advised as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mercury with Neptune and all that.
Mm-hmm. Well, another tragic event happened on January 22nd, a couple of years later in 1905. And this event is known as Bloody Sunday. And I added a photo here of Father Georgy Gapon, Russian Orthodox priest who led the workers' procession to present a petition to the Tsar. And tell us more about that, David.
So yeah, the workers have had very poor conditions, as we all know, in the beginning of the 20th century, in factories and stuff, with the rapidly evolving industrialization through Europe. And the Russians were trying to keep up the pace, but they were very bad at social justice and at worker rights and basically humanity. So the Russian elite, the owners of the industries basically that were opening up, they didn't want to give their workers better conditions, and the workers basically thought to themselves, very much encouraged by rebel parties, and also by other people with some influence, such as this priest that you were mentioning, that wanted to see some change. They were led by these people to do a peaceful protest in front of the Tsar's palace, trying to present to the Tsar some needs that they were having in these factories, because they thought that if the Tsar saw them, because they knew somehow that the Tsar was not being advised as they wanted. They knew somehow that the Tsar was not receiving the information that he needed to receive to know what the people were going through. So led by that thought, they were believing that this would work. And when they got to the palace in front of Red Square, the guard from the palace started shooting at them, open fire at them, in an event that became known as Bloody Sunday. Again, hundreds of people were killed, and the Tsar was then forever saw as a despot, which, you know, by negligence he was. Yeah, his reputation was forever tarnished. Here with the astrology side of it, we see the sun being in its detriment, which is representative of power authorities being falling from authority. Basically, in very simple terms, it's going over her midheaven, which is not very good in terms of omens for her reputation. Her own image was being tarnished by this, along with this Tsar's image, because her image is the image of the monarchy, of course. So, and we also have the ruler of the year, Saturn, as Michelle has highlighted here, being in that same house, in that same ninth house of the reputation. So as Saturn is the lord of the year, we see that harsh themes of reputation might come up for her because it rules her midheaven, and it's significant already of bad things happening. It's natally in a not so positive house also for her. So you would expect some harsh events to manifest here. And sure enough, when this happened, she was already isolated with her family, including her husband. He wasn't even in St. Petersburg at the time, at the capital. So he didn't see this event happening. But it was the way they were instructed to deal with under his authority. So you can't say that he was totally not to blame for this event. But he wasn't aware. He was not there also to stop his guard. He was also not there quickly enough to deal with the dealings that he had to deal with. He was often absent from the capital, as in that day. And that's because him and the Tsarina were very reclusive. He knew that his wife was being ostracized in court, and she pressured him to be with them. And he was also feeling pressure to be with them because he didn't want to be a Tsar effectively. He wanted to be blissfully unaware of what was happening in the capital, and he wanted his ministers to do his bidding for him in there. And that's what his ministers did, basically. So it was his fault by negligence in a lot of ways. But this is what happened to the reputation at this time. And Mercury, the ruler of the month, mentioning by passing, is also activating the ruler of the year by transit there. So
while the Russian revolutionaries were becoming more and more restless, Alex became more and more restless as well.
Yeah, we see here in 1907, 2 years after Bloody Sunday, the episode we were just talking about, the family was retreating a lot more than they used to, and the Tsarina was less seen by the public in public events. Of course, they did their public events, but it was less often. She was very sick all the time, and she was very stressed about all the demands and about all the ostracization. But here we see Venus as the Lord of the Year transiting the first house, but we put this time around. It was an approximate time because we don't know the exact time. So we put Venus, the Lord of the Year, transiting the first, but we know that it was after she turned a certain age, so we know what profection house to look at it for which ruler. So this was a 12th house profection. I believe she was 35, right, Michelle? Yeah, she was 35. So here, her son had an accident. Of course, he was a hemophiliac. We have, again, Venus, the ruler of the 12th, associated with loss, the 12th house as well. Ruler of the 5th and 12th at the same time, ruler of the year being activated. So the natal promise around her children having accidents, because Venus is again conjunct Mars, is present. And we also see that she begins at this time corresponding with Rasputin, and Rasputin, which is the man we mentioned in the first video as who would basically help bring down the image of the monarchy as well, as part of the anti-monarchist propaganda at the time. He came in to the royal circle at this time when her son had an accident, and he was called in to heal the boy. And it was said that he came in, he prayed on his leg, and the boy, who was in excruciating pain and agony, instantly felt better and started recovering by the next day, which was a miracle, nothing short of a miracle in her eyes at the time. She was a very religious woman. She believed in the power that God conferred to her family. Therefore, she was always believing that God would want to heal her family by any means necessary. So she was very ready to believe the miracles that Rasputin was administering. And of course, I'm not one to say against such practices. However, I do believe that there was a lot more happening behind this whole treatment scenario that Rasputin was able to confer to her son in a lot of ways. And we're talking about Rasputin also because we have Jupiter here again, that archetypal guru, having the natal opposition activated to Saturn during this most of this period. And yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it with this part. I wanted to mention more of the accident and the ruler of the year connection.
Okay, and in the meantime, the Tsarina wants to isolate herself more and more. But at one point, they do travel to the Isle of Wight, and we have the date. That's on August 2nd, 1909.
Yeah, this is a very fun thing to look at because we have the exact dates for the trip, as you can see on screen. And therefore, we can really see the themes being activated by the planets here. We have the second house being ruled by the moon, which naturally is associated with travel. The moon is in a sign of Mercury, which is also naturally associated with travel. The moon here in this transit is, of course, in the 9th house, also relating to traveling abroad, which she did to travel to visit her family. But we have also traveling to see your family, as Robert Schmidt teaches in a few of his lectures, is associated with the 3rd house. Even if you have to travel abroad, if you're traveling to your homeland or to see your relatives or to see your family, that kind of traveling is also connected to the 3rd house as much as it is abroad. So there is a theme here with the moon transiting the 9th and being the lord of the year, and then they have them having to travel overseas or lands. But the characteristics don't change anyway. We have Mercury as also associated with travel, being in the 3rd, the sun also being the ruler of that house, being in that 3rd house as well. So a lot of themes of travel being activated at the same time. I just wanted to throw this here so you could see. And Venus and Jupiter, the benefics, going through the 4th house of family. She was visiting her other royal family.
Yeah. And so here we have September 15th of 1912. Alexandra is 40 years old, and it is a 5th house profection year. And I believe this is when Rasputin enters the stage again.
Yeah, I think this was the date. I got it from one of the documentaries that I watched. So remember, I'm not a historian. I do research my topics on several documentaries, yes, but they're mostly available on YouTube, so you all can do this research on yourselves. What I'm doing here is pointing out the techniques. I think this is the closest date that we have, because I wouldn't have mentioned it this way. I would have said just random date, but I think it was around
Sorry,
September.
I think I took like September 15th just to get half of the month, because we know it is in September.
Yeah, I think it was around September. I think when we were checking the sources, when we were doing the research for this video, we actually got around a very close date around September, the month of September. So we can see here Saturn is, again, this is a 5th house perfection year, but this is a Venus year, but this is this time a 5th house perfection instead of the last one, which was a 12th. But this time we have Mars during this period of September going over Venus here, which is the ruler of the year. And Venus is in her own sign, also activating the sign of the year, which is important. Remember, every time we have transits over the sign of the year, or with involving the ruler of the year, we should see important events manifesting to the general narrative of what you're going to experience that year. So, and the natal promise will dictate what sort of events could manifest overall. So we have a repetition here in the activated at sign of the year of Venus conjunct Mars, which is a natal promise in the 1st house there, which has to do with one's reputation as well. But we have an accident with Alexei, which was very, we have a very dangerous accident that he was involved in because he fell off something and hurt his leg, again, his thigh or something. And when someone who's hemophiliac hurts themselves like that, the hemorrhage can actually be so strong that the blood invades. This is a little triggering for those of you who are a little sensitive, but it's going to be quick, and I'm not going to do this so personally. The blood invades a little bit of the joints, and the cartilage it becomes a little looser, for what I understand, or something like that, and it causes a lot of pain for the person that has this condition. So Alexei would like scream in pain constantly until he lost his voice. He would be nights and days feverish because of the pain. And that's what you see here with this Mars transit activating this house. That's the house of the year, and the loss of blood, the 12th house themes here being activated. We have Saturn again transiting the Lord of the year. So a chronic disease that her child has is being very prominent at this time, in other words. And we see Rasputin coming into the picture again because it had been exiled previously because the court didn't want anything to have to do with him. And so they pressured the Tsar and Tsarina to get rid of him at one point, and he was cast out. But at this point, the Tsarina was like, he's the only one that can heal my son. So bring my Pack Wizard back. Bring him back right now. And so they were like, sure. You're still the Empress. Let that will be done. So they brought him back. But first, there was no time for him to get back as quickly as they needed to because the boy was quickly waning. There was actually a priest, an Orthodox priest, already announced to have given him the last sacraments. I don't remember how you call that. The last rites.
Sacraments.
Yeah, the last sacraments. And he was passing away. Basically, the heir to the Russian throne was passing away, and this is a huge thing to the stability of the monarchy. It was no monarchy, basically, because girls were not allowed to succeed by law. So in an already very unstable scenario, this could not happen. The Tsarina was desperate. They were all desperate. So sure, call the wizard back. But he sent a telegram ahead of him telling the Tsarina, do not let the doctors disturb the boy. He is going to survive. God has heard your prayers. Or something like that. And it said that as soon as the telegram was read out loud to Alexei, he started feeling better and started to heal. So from this point on, Rasputin gained complete power over the Tsarina, and he gained her complete trust. From now on, she would become completely blindsided to every bad rumor about him because she didn't want to hear it. She would be willingly blindsided. And they wouldn't tell her because she would hush anyone who would try to speak ill of him. And yeah, basically that was it. She would try to keep him also as much out of sight as she could, that she wouldn't deny that he was in her inner circle anymore because she knew that he was a present from God. She saw him as a present from God. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we see an exact square here from Neptune to natal Neptune, and Neptune is transiting natal Jupiter here in the 2nd house. So blind.
So yeah, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What did you say?
Blind faith.
Blind faith, exactly. It's that kind of blind faith that she had in Rasputin. She was associating herself 11th house with shady characters. Her reputation was being tarnished because of that association. You see Neptune transiting her natal Jupiter as well, which is also the ruler of her 7th, representing her husband. So this priest had a lot of power over her, and this was very damaging to her reputation and image, and the monarchies, therefore.
Yeah. But the 5th is ruled by a
and she was
benefic.
having blind faith on him, of course.
Yeah. I was just thinking,
Yeah.
the 5th is ruled by a benefic, Venus, so the boy lives. Okay, we'll go over to the
and we have also the eclipses. I didn't mention that, but we had also the eclipses happening with that slide. So the nodes were transiting that house as well. So the loss of blood that is represented
nodes
by
are transiting.
her child appearance. So the end is near. Yeah. This is when everything culminated, when after years of bad choices that would render them unpopular with the public and would give boost to several revolutionary discourses. They finally, all these events finally culminated in the abdication on March 15th, 1917. Which is when Alexandra and her whole family are destituted from power, basically. She loses her status, her whole status as Empress and all of that. And she is put into house arrest, basically. Initially in a palace, which they stayed in for months, being kept as basically circus animals in a lot of times, because many of the peasants would just go up to the palace to see the royals walking around and working, where previously they would let other people do that kind of work for them, the kind of manual work that was the only thing that they had left to do. And they were told to do anyway by the people who were watching over them just for fun, because they wanted to see the Tsar doing manual work sometimes. But he didn't mind, apparently, by some accounts, and they actually had a little respect for him left most of the time. So yeah, but they were still under house arrest in a familiar place. So we see here with this scenario after the abdication and them losing power, we see that in the date where all of that happened, Alexandra has a stellium, which really resembles the stellium that she has in the 1st house, with Mars, Venus together again, and the sun there, indicating that something of the natal promise could be important here. But also, we have Saturn transiting her natal Jupiter. Saturn, of course, here is the ruler of the MC. Again, remember the event of 1905, something that really was really bad for the reputation of the Tsar, because it was basically what marked the Tsar doesn't care for us, because they killed a bunch of workers who wanted rights. So that was a very poignant situation. And here we see the repetition with enough, everyone turning on the Tsar. We are not going to kill our own people anymore, and the revolutionaries kind of gaining power. And how do we see that? The ruler of the year, Saturn, representative of those hardships in her life, is opposed to its own place of dignity in her natal chart. It's in Capricorn, it's domiciled in her natal chart, even though it's in a bad house. But here we see a malefic transit of Rahu, the north node, which is considered to be malefic, in her Saturn, exacerbating the maleficence of that spot, of that placement. The south node also in the 2nd house in Cancer, doing the same. Saturn is stripped of his power. The ruler of the year is stripped of his own power and dignity in Cancer, and conjunct a planet that is naturally a benefic planet exalted in her chart and ruler of that 10th house stellium that we are seeing in this transit. So we are, in other words, the Lord of the Year is representing her destitution from power and the stripping away of every exaltation that Jupiter, the Lord of the 10th and 7th, her husband, had been conferred to that point. Her husband lost his power. and thus she lost her own. And we have a revolutionaries, Uranus, of course, causing the whole ordeal. So Uranus conjunct her natal Jupiter here gains another connotation for interpretation at this event. And the South Node is, of course, a diminishing force, as opposite to the exaggerating force of the North Node. So we see, again, diminishing power repeatedly in this chart. And Jupiter is in the 12th, so loss of power as well. The planet that's in the second exalted is losing that power. She lost her assets. She was in domicile prison, which is a palace, right? So gilded cage, basically Jupiter in the 12th. Yeah, and Mercury was in its detriment, conjunct Venus, also his ruler.
All right. Are we ready for the grand finale?
Guess so. This is a sadder chart because this is really, really a tragic event. We have a whole family and their servants, which were faithful friends by that point because they were obviously not getting paid for anything. They were just with the family because they chose to be, because they loved the family that they were working with. They were still servants, and I'm not wanting to romanticize the servant royal family relationship too much here, but they were still considered to be friends, and they were close to these people. And they were all shot dead in a basement in a very undignified way, which no one deserves to be. I know that a lot of people under their neglect were killed in even more horrific types of ways, but it's unarguable that what happened to them was gruesome. So here we see in July 17th, in the early hours of that day, around 1 or 2 a.m., the family was woken up by the group of mercenaries that were assigned to kill them. They had been they had been communing with those mercenaries for a couple of weeks already at this point, because the mercenaries were sent there to kill them specifically, but they were waiting for the order. And it was said that a couple of days before, when they had already gotten the green light to go ahead with the killings, or a few hours before, in the same day, perhaps in the 16th, the Yusakov, I think his name was seen talking, which was the leader, was seen talking to Alexei, asking him fondly if he was fine and stuff like that. So it was a very, very cruel type of scenario. They killed 5 children. So the Tsarina lost her children that night, and her whole family, obviously, in her own life. We have Mercury, the ruler of the first house of the body and health, therefore, conjoining to the Lord of the 8th, which is a clear bad transit. The Lord of the first with the Lord of the 8th exactly conjunct in the Lord of the 8th's exile, Leo. We have the 3rd house there, which is also not a very good house. It's the least favorable of the houses that are not considered bad, or the least bad of the houses that are considered bad. Depends on who you're asking. But we have Jupiter in Cancer here, but unfortunately it didn't help much. We had people on their way to try to help them, but they never got there. Unfortunately, we have Mercury meeting the Lord of the 8th first. And the Venus here is conjunct the South Node. She lost her children. Mars, the Lord of the Year, they were all shot and bayoneted to death. So there's very bloody death. There was blood everywhere from everyone. It was a massacre. So Mars, a lot of Martian significations here. Mars was Lord of the Year, of course. The moon had just entered. If you put it to the exact location, you would see, and time, you would see that the moon's location was Scorpio already, was just ingressed. It was a 0 Scorpio, but we are sure that by the time that is on the records, even close to that time, the moon had recently ingressed into Scorpio. We are sure of that. And also entering to Mars, therefore. So Venus was activating her natal position in the 1st house and also Mars's position. Venus was the ruler of Mars. Again, Venus-Mars combinations bringing her not only trouble, but the worst kind of trouble that she could go through. And it has to do with reputation and who she became, basically. And it's through mostly no fault of her own, I want to say, because she was ill-advised all the way, and she was mostly just a mother that was trying to do the best she could with the education that she had. And, you know, she was negligent and spoiled, yes, but she didn't deserve the fate that she got in any capacity, I would say. And yeah, her children all died. And we can see the end of the Romanov dynasty here and then, there and then.
Yeah. Thank you, David. And the symbolism here is truly mind-blowing. And we also have, yeah, Jupiter moving closer to Pluto is another example of the king coming closer to death. And you want to talk a little bit about the symbolism of Venus and Mars and the jewels that have actually protected the children from the bullets?
Oh, that's horrible.
It's a gruesome story. I don't know if you want to tell it, but
yeah, it's a gruesome detail. The girls in the Tsarina, they had been sewing their jewels into their clothing, undergarments specifically, because they didn't want their heirlooms to be stolen before they could sell them to make a living out abroad without depending too much on family assets, other people's assets. So they were smart, but that actually ended up being harmful for them. And Mars here is in detriment in Venus's sign. So what they were trying to do to impede, and again, this is a good house, and Venus is a benefic sign. So Venus kind of, you can actually argue archetypally that Venus tried to save the children. Because Venus, jewels, was, and Jupiter there as well in Cancer exalted, but the jewels of the girls specifically were sewn into their garments. And we have the South Node here, their undergarments, things that are kind of hidden. But we have Mars there in detriment, bouncing off, and then we have Mars in detriment there, bouncing off their clothes when they're being shot in the basement. And then they wouldn't die, the guys. So they actually watched their whole family being killed in front of them. They were desperate because they were seeing that happening, knowing that it would happen to them, feeling the shots, but not being actually wounded. So they would fall to the ground and be like just confused, screaming, feeling pain, but not knowing if they were actually bleeding or anything at first. But very quickly they were bayoneted to death. And it's said even that Anastasia, the youngest girl, was shot in the head after waking up, after being bayoneted. She woke up in the truck and screamed, and she had to be put out by a shot, a final shot to the head. So we see a lot of Martian activations here, and this is a very serious story, but at the same time, this astrological symbolism is so undeniable. And we have the Venus with the South Node here again, and the nodes being in the opposite positions from themselves, activating their natal houses, again, harming the Tsarina's body, and representing that eclipsing quality of not only her, but her whole family was impacted by this eclipse, this eclipsing nature of the nodes in the natal promise, until finally they were all kind of eclipsed. And they were all kind of eclipsed. They didn't show up, like their bodies were never found. They didn't know if they were dead or alive for decades. Only Nicholas was announced as dead for a long period of time. So there was a lot of uncertainty about the rest of the family. And until 1997, there was a lot of uncertainty about the fate of even two of the children, if they had survived or not. So yeah, eclipsing.
That's right. Okay, and well, this is the end, not only for the Romanovs, but also for our series on Alexandra, the Last Tsarina of Russia. And I want to thank everyone for watching, and a huge thanks goes out to you, David, for the extensive research that you have done. You are amazing, and we enjoyed making this series so much. We had so much fun. David,
Yeah, this is
tell
so
us.
cool.
Yeah, so I guess we're gonna do another one, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes.
Tell us again, David, where people can find you.
Yeah, they can find me on my Instagram, David Fischer Astrology. This is Fischer with Fisch, so you have to put the S and the C. David Fischer Astrology. And if you want to contact me through email or anything else, you have my contacts there on that page as well. So.
Okay, great. I'll put your info in the description box. Wonderful. I also have a short announcement to make, by the way. I'm going to give a talk on Easter Day at Nightlight Astrology. My talk is titled Rising from the Dead.
I'm so excited for that, actually.
Please go to my website, michelsmidheaven.com, if you want to find more about that. Found out about that. And all right, that's it for today. Please give us a thumbs up if you like our content, and be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. Lovely people. See you next time.